Shri Jamshed Godrej ji, Shri Madhav Pai ji, Tini Tran, Hyun Hee Ban, Rajit Matthews ji, friends, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants, I am very pleased to be here with you today for the 2023 edition of Connect Karo, WRI-India's flagship policy conclave. I am informed that I attended the last two as well, but those were virtually, so perhaps they don't register as much as today's session. And I'm glad that we are able to meet in person. I'm also honored, of course, to be invited to deliver the keynote in the session on transformational urbanization for 2047 or at 2047. As I think one of you mentioned, I have had the privilege of being associated with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs since 3rd September 2017, which makes it 6 years. And my ministry has had the privilege of implementing most of the flagship programs of the Honorable Prime Minister, the Swachh Bharat Mission Urban, the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana Urban, the Smart Cities Mission Amrut, and subsequently many others like the Swanidhi scheme. I think you mentioned the NULM also. During these last 6 years that I have been associated, the schemes themselves are of a slightly older vintage. The Prime Minister assumed office in May 2014, and the initial few months were utilized in conceptualizing these schemes, and I think most of them had their implementation commence in June 2015. So we have had an 8-year period. Although we are looking at the government's 9-year record, these schemes have really been in operation only 8 years. And there are some very basic facts and figures which I think need to be placed before a body like this, which has of course an Indian chapter and an Indian dimension, but you also have a global perspective. And when you look at cities, I think it's good to see the transformation both in the thinking on urbanization and the kind of distance that we've traveled since 1947. The responsibility for development prior to that rested elsewhere. So after 1947, when we assumed responsibility as an independent nation, out of a population of something like 350 million at that point of time, 17% of India was broadly characterized as being urban. Fast forward from 1947 to 2023, and we are proceeding onwards to 2047. That is also the time horizon of your session today. Again, I want to share some very basic facts. From that 17% of our population which is regarded as urban, we are now looking at figures like 30% and going forward to 40% and on to 50%. But that's not the startling part of the statistic. That 30 and 40% will be on a population base of 1.4 billion or more going forward. And that also should provide an indication of the enormity of the challenge, both in terms of where we started, where we are today, and going forward. If you were to look at the landmass of India, a figure that perhaps not many of us are aware of, only 3% of our area would be covered by cities. As little as that. And that 3% which is urban or cities, I'm not going into finer nuances like we have 4,900 urban local bodies. I'm going to leave that out. That 3% of covered area provides 60% of the country's GDP. And going forward, by 2050, it is going to provide 75% of the GDP. Now, there are two parts of the narrative which I was fascinated by when I initially joined the ministry 6 years ago. One is a dominant, or was a dominant Western narrative which described India as a reluctant urbanizer. My sense is that tag of reluctant urbanizer perhaps emanated, or that characterization emanated from those who were not entirely familiar with what was happening in India. And what was happening in India in and of itself was also a kind of robust, autonomous urbanization which was taking place. There were demographic shifts in population, people moving from the rural and semi-rural to the semi-urban and urban. There was a growth of tier 2 and 3 cities, but I don't think it is all captured. But on our side, that tag of reluctant urbanizer was perhaps accompanied by a lack of sufficient attention to what the challenges of urbanization entail. Now, I came to this portfolio from 39 years of foreign security and trade policy and 5 or 6 years of international think tanking after that. So when I started my basic education here, I also realized that perhaps the lack of attention was not just lack of attention, it was neglect. And even with all the restraint at which is part of my persona as a diplomat, I even termed it as a criminal neglect of the urban space. And I've had these conversations with Mr. Godrej and others in on different platforms. Let me just share with you some figures which capture that stark difference. One is in the 10 years prior to Mr. Modi assuming responsibility in May 2014. I'm talking about the years 2004 to 2014. I'm not making a political point, but the hard truth is that the entire expenditure on the urban space, I'm not talking about private sector investment, I'm not talking about what Mr. Godrej and other members of the industrial fraternity do in terms of investing in urban space. I'm talking about the government. The entire cumulative expenditure that all the government schemes individually and then taken together was incurred by the government in 10 years was 1,57,000 crores. That is 10-year period. And my submission to you is that the following period, the 8 years which I have just described, that expenditure has gone up from 1,57,000 crores to 18 lakh crores. This is what, 12, 13, 14 times increase in expenditure. Now, there's no point my telling you what happened prior to 2004, because you saw the infrastructure. So where did this new thinking come, and what were the challenges? First and foremost, I think it's time. I did that in a more robust discussion yesterday when somebody drew my attention to climate science and how our cities are faring, and I said, wait a minute, first and foremost realize that under the Indian Constitution, land is a state subject. So if a state government or a union territory fails in discharging its constitutional responsibility on those things. It's a very serious matter, and you can't move away from that discharge of that responsibility by either obfuscation or passing the blame around, as some people do. There's a hard reality there. But where did we, when we started off in 2014, start moving, and what have we been able to achieve? And I think when you talk about transformational urbanization 2047, what is the 2047 significance? I mean, you must have had a reason for choosing that, probably 100 years of India as an independent nation. But I think as a member of Mr. Modi's team, look at 2047 also from another point of view. That is the point at which the Honorable Prime Minister expects us to be what is called a Viksit or a developed nation. Are we getting there? Now, if you have to get there, then the infrastructure has to keep pace, or the infrastructure will also become one of the determinants which individually or along with other factors molds that journey. Many of the others, the health sector, etc., education, we could have a long discussion on that. You could also argue conversely that countries which are characterized as developed have perhaps not paid enough attention to the health care system or some of the other sectors. I'm not getting into that debate. But when you look at what we have done, I just want to give you one or two and annotate one or two of our schemes so that you get an understanding of what the comprehensiveness of that challenge. But before I do that, I'm always very happy to respond to Mr. Godrej's call for the government to deepen its relationship with the private sector, not only the private sector, the other stakeholders, on strengthening the green rating. And I may have said this to him earlier, and I apologize if I'm repeating this, but not only are we fully supportive, and he endorsed that thing, but perhaps the Prime Minister has gone several steps further. We declared one entire year, I think it was 2020 or 21, 2019, I'm glad I've been correct. Yes, those were the COVID. Entire year as to provide a focus on green technologies in the housing sector. So we invited all the major players, not only in the construction business, in the think tanks, those who are doing work in the universities and academic institutions, and the entire year was spent in the form of a institutionalized seminar. Out of that, we shortlisted 53 technologies, if memory serves me right, and we utilized 6 of those technologies for glasshouse projects. Now, I think that's something unique. It also endorses and reinforces what Mr. Godrej and other well-meaning public policy people have been saying. And today I'm very happy to tell you that most efforts with which the government is associated would make that a central point. And where is government associated? Either in the companies which are tied to the public sector, the CPWD, etc. So the green part is a very important part. I also happen to hold the other portfolio, petroleum and natural gas. And as I keep emphasizing all along, our journey on the energy front has a very pronounced green and sustainability focus. My stormtrooper sitting here who will always test me on figures, in 2014 when the Prime Minister assumed responsibility, our biofuel mixing was at 1.4%. 1.6%. Today we had a target of 10% by November 22. We did it 5 months in advance. We had a target of 20% biofuel blending by 2030. We brought it forward to 2025. If my memory serves me right, we have 1,350 petrol outlets which are selling E20 or biofuel in which petrol in which biofuel or ethanol is mixed up to 20%. Our green hydrogen mission is working overtime. So we are acutely conscious that as we develop, and the development part is an important part. In 2014, when Modi ji assumed responsibility, we were the 10th largest economy. Today we are the 5th largest economy. The reports I read, information in the public domain means that if events in Europe continue the way they are, or in the other parts of the world, and if we continue to grow at 6.5% plus, we will be the 3rd largest economy before long. What's happening to our urban sector? My predecessor, who then went on to become the Vice President of India, used a somewhat more grand term. He used to call it the urban renaissance. Being a more modest person, I choose to call it urban rejuvenation, because I think we are still in the world of facts and figures and what we have been able to achieve. On the housing front, and I am only talking about urban, because if I take the urban and rural, it comes to something like 3 crore homes having been sanctioned. If you look at the urban part, it's 1 crore and 12 lakhs have been grounded, 1 crore 19 lakhs sanctioned, and 75 lakhs have already been delivered to beneficiaries. If you look at the Swachh Bharat mission or the sanitation, I don't want to spend more time, but I'll just give you one statistic which should capture it. In 2014, only 17% of the waste that was produced in the urban space was processed, reprocessed scientifically. Today that 17% figure has gone up to 76%. And I am very confident, and I say this with my friends from the 4th estate sitting here, we will accomplish 100% before long, because the investment in the pipeline, the STPs, and all the other action point in the direction of moving towards 100%. And for a country that produces as much garbage as we do, that's saying a lot. Which does not, of course, take away the responsibility of state governments, which have to do the cleaning of drains and dredging and all those. I'm not getting into that debate for the moment. We also started an Amrut scheme, which essentially entailed selecting 500 cities with a population of 1 lakh or 100,000, and those 500 cities were so selected to provide basic water tap connections, to provide stormwater drainage, and a number of other facilities. We were able to provide more than 1.4 crore water tap connections and more than 1.08 crore sewer connection. This also initiated a wide-ranging set of municipal reforms, such as GIS-based master planning, online building permission systems, municipal bonds, and so on. Anyone who is anyone, whether they criticize the government or neutral or on our side, cannot fail to see the transformation taking place. You and I can argue that left to ourselves, if we were in a less challenging environment, there are certain things we might have been able to do better. Let me come to some basic statistics. The Amrut scheme covered essentially 66% of our urban space. Clearly, when we were approaching the 2019 elections, one of the questions most often thrown at me was, when is the follow-up scheme coming? And equally, the Swachh Bharat mission, it had some very important objectives. The Prime Minister, speaking from the ramparts of the Red Fort on 15th August 2014, said that it was his dream that by the time India celebrates the 150th anniversary, birth anniversary of the Mahatma, India should be open defecation free. A lot of my friends who broadly are characterized on the liberal side said, why is the Prime Minister making this thing? So I said, I know what you think. I think it's the most important announcement I've ever heard from the Red Fort. Because the sanitation, open defecation free objective is the fulcrum of all the other urban schemes. And I'm very happy to inform you that the scheme or the objectives were met. The objectives being met through the production or construction of a large number of individual household toilets or public toilets. That's the easier part. You can get people around. And that bulk of the country, apart from one state which came on board later, there were some problems there, also became open defecation free. And that open defecation free tag comes not through self-certification but through third-party verification, and periodically you can lose it if you're not careful. So I had a former finance minister who likes to take a pot shot at us, and I welcome those. Once he said, look, how is this Swachh Bharat? He showed some photographs of some place in one of the southern states which had a large number of people using those public toilets. So basically what he meant was there should be more public toilets. So I told my colleagues, don't get startled whenever somebody of his eminence or stature makes these accusations. Welcome those as opportunities. We did, and we found out that the gentleman was focusing on private land, not on state land. So it's all right. So we gave it back to him gently. He didn't come back. But look, the success of the Swachh Bharat mission comes not from the number of toilets we build. It comes from the fact that a project of the government has become a project of the people. It has become a Jan Andolan. And therefore it has led into a change in the behavioral pattern of people. Initially when you build toilets, some people told me this is against Indian culture because people like to, it's an open country, lot of big fields, they like to go and answer the call of nature outside. Maybe. So when the toilets came, they said, very good, covered space, let's open a tailor's shop here. There were in fact movies made on that. But today, you will find that people will ask for more public toilets, people will ask for more individual household toilets. So there's a revolutionary change in that. But Amrut 1 and Swachh Bharat Mission 1, these schemes were quickly replaced by the 2.0 version of them. I'm very happy to inform you that the resources the government made available for Swachh Bharat Mission 1 and Amrut 2.0 and Amrut 2.0 is a whopping 4,71,000 crores. So which means 100% India will be covered through Amrut, not just the 66%. It will be much deeper. You are now going from just open defecation free, but ODF plus, ODF plus plus. You're going to garbage free cities. You're going to, water security, whole. So that is the transformation that is taking place. I want to fast forward a little and come to the smart cities mission project. Again, we were not familiar with what smart cities are, and forgive me, my friend with whom I have a long friendship and who's had a long association with WRI. I don't think many people outside India were familiar with what smart cities are. There was talk in academia, but there was no practical experience. So when we were drafting the manifesto of the party, we means the party, in 2014, somebody inserted, we will build 100 new smart cities. When we got down to doing it, we said, hey, wait a minute. New here means greenfield. What do you do about the existing cities? And that I think is the real challenge, which is an absolutely peculiar Indian challenge. Because you have 1,000-year-old cities. Look at Varanasi. Where else in the world do you have a thriving, culturally rich 1,000-year-old city and you're transforming it into a modern smart city? And you can't dig because you've got archaeological issues yet doing it. So we adopted a combination of the two. When we chose the cities, and the cities were not chosen by us, they were selected through a system of election or selection. Each city put forward proposals, and I think 90 of those proposals were in traditional old cities, area-based development in a confined area. New Delhi, for instance, became the smart city component here. It succeeded on the competition basis. And today I'm very happy to inform you that 5,858 projects worth rupees 1.07 lakh crores have been completed. All the 100 smart cities have operational integrated command and control centers. And during the pandemic, we discovered how useful these were, because they were really acting like war rooms. But I would recommend those of you who have not visited our integrated command and control centers, I'd be very happy to arrange for you to see them. You see how with the use of technology, the entire range of urban civics amenities are mapped on huge screens like a NASA screen, and you have people working behind computers who can tell you exactly where a garbage truck is. So earlier, and they're tagged, and if somebody's throwing garbage on the road, you'll see it on a camera. In fact, if you visit me in my office in Maan Bhavan, I have also a very interesting office on the, 6th floor? 5th floor, where you can look at the entire map of India, every project which is being executed on real time. So when the Honorable Prime Minister was, he gets periodically, he wants to be briefed. So when he was undertaking a briefing of one of the glasshouse projects, if I remember correctly, lighthouse projects, and we showed photos. He said no, he wants to do it on real time. So by real time means satellite, drones, everything there. So you can see the exact number of people. I apologize, I use the word lighthouse projects. And you can see the work being going on as you are looking at it, number of people on the site, etc. So all this, older tendency of, roads are being built but only on paper, all that is gone, because you can see the state of the road. It's all documented. When did you undertake the repairs? Why did something happen? So that's the change that this whole thing has come about. I'm very often asked, but you have 4,900 urban local bodies, why only 100 smart cities? To that my response is, where does it say that the government has to do everything? Even the smart city project is a very large percentage of the work is through public-private partnership, and I'm very happy. Many state governments are smartifying their cities along the smart city lines by themselves. A lot of private sector players are utilizing that technology and that experience to do that. The Uttar Pradesh state government wants down to smart villages. So it's the demonstrative effect of that. And I think when you're looking at case studies in terms of what urban experience is, I think some of these would serve as a very good eye-opener into how the transformation takes place. If you go to a place like New Raipur, which is a greenfield smart city, it's all sci-fi and everything, because you've done it from new. But if you look at the old traditional cities which have had thousands of years of living and civilization there. I know I have nearing my time limit, but I just want to conclude with urban transport, if I may, and make one or two other points to conclude. I read a statement in the press somewhere that my friend Amitabh was here yesterday, and he said that you have to plan to take people around, not cars around. I mean, I'm going to ask him to pay me the copyright on that, because that's a term I was using. Maybe he's used it also, but I'm just joking. He's 100% right. Our problem is that as the country is succeeding in terms of the economic growth, the normal tendency everybody has is get another two-wheeler, three-wheeler, four-wheeler, and the number of cars are multiplying. I think we have, the third largest automobile market, second largest, he says, in my research assistant. No, but I worry that that's not something we should be driving so much pride out. We should be driving pride out of the urban transport. And there I am happy, because we started off in metro systems. We today have the 5th largest metro system. And again, because we have 860 kilometers of metro lines operational, and we have 917 under construction, and all these constructions are a fixed deadline. 3 months from now this line will be operated, 4 months from now so. We are going to be the world's second largest metro network after China. Because with 860 there and 917 under construction, we will be bigger than the metro system in the US. And the US, which I am very familiar, I don't think they are going to build more metros. At least not that I am aware of. Now, we need to do more there. Urban transport, for the kind of population we have, the number of urban buses we should have, and we are working on that very seriously, should be many more. And every citizen, I believe, every consumer, every citizen should have the right to choose. And this is where last mile connectivity becomes very important. That he steps out of his house and almost straight into public transport, into a metro system, and can commute to work or wherever he or she is going and back. I was very happy to see one of the award winners in the listing you had, whereas 93% of the people had access to a park. I think it was Columbia, was it? Yeah. I mean, that is the kind of thing that we must do in terms of transport also. Because then you will be able to move people around. Otherwise, what's happening is because people are getting relatively, more purchasing power, more money to spend, and then there's always delight that you have. We haven't reached the clog points in terms of urban traffic that other cities I've lived in my life as a foreign service officer, but we will get there. You will get to those points where there will be total jams. So I'm very happy on that front that public transport, at least the metro one, is doing very well, and we need to step on the gas on the other. Now, climate change, all that I can say is that those of us who were climate skeptics, and when I used to live in the US and a particular president, I of course anticipated, I wrote a book that he's going to win, but he was a complete climate skeptic. I think we should be a little careful now. Today, the weather patterns, today it's not the ability of the cities to this thing, but Jamshed, if you get rains which are the highest in 50 years, or you get these kinds of climatic distortion, I think we might have to go back to the drawing board for fundamentals. And I think enough was said about 1.5 degrees. So I'm not going to get into that debate, but I think these are not just challenges. These are, if you may permit me to say that, existential challenges, and we've got to grab. Finally, I want to conclude that we must marry normative and rules-based planning frameworks with flexible and market-oriented development facilitation. For this, it is important to understand the economic geography behind the growth of our cities, and it is pleasing, therefore, that I will be releasing an informative new report by WRI on the subject. I've not had a chance to go through the full report, but I've glanced at the key findings and recommendations, and I find that it is encouraging to see such detailed economic and spatial analysis being undertaken on the economic density and differentiation within a megapolis such as Delhi. So I congratulate the WRI-India on this report and look forward to the increased research and policy insights it may lead to. I could go on preparing greater urban resilience, etc. But I would make some parts of my statement available. Now, I also had the privilege recently of addressing the Urban 20, and I think some of the recommendations that the Urban 20 have made, and I think the mayors and city leaders of all those who have endorsed the U20 declaration need to be complimented on that. So may I just conclude and thank you very much for bearing with me, and I'm very happy to be part of this discussion. Thank you very much.